They said she was just a cook, a quiet woman with a steady hand and a soft smile, who ran the morning shift at the diner off Highway 16. No one knew her name before she started wearing that little gold tag that read Emily. She was polite, fast, always had the coffee pot in motion. But sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she'd stare out the window like she was watching something long gone, or waiting for something to come back. Make sure to like and subscribe if you agree that some heroes don't hang their uniforms on walls, they carry them in silence. Because what happened that Tuesday morning proved that peace is sometimes just an intermission between battles. The day began like any other. The sun had just climbed over the ridge, painting the gravel lot in gold and dust. Truckers lined up for pancakes and fuel, farmers for coffee and talk. The smell of bacon and maple syrup filled the air, the radio humming low with country tunes. Behind the counter, Emily Carter stood in her white apron, sleeves rolled up, a chef's knife glinting in her hand as she diced green peppers with clockwork precision. She was 28, too young, most thought, to be carrying the kind of stillness that comes from surviving something no one else could understand. Her movements were rhythmic, exact, not like someone who learned in culinary school, but like someone trained to make every motion count, every angle matter. Most people didn't pay attention. She was just part of the background. The woman who'd arrived in town 2 years ago, bought an old trailer by the river, and never talked about her past. No one questioned why she always sat facing the door, or why she flinched when someone dropped a plate. Some said she'd left a bad marriage. Others whispered that she'd done time. But no one guessed the truth, that she had once worn a uniform, not of polyester and cotton, but of sand, blood, and steel. That morning, the diner was half full. The regulars were arguing about baseball scores, the jukebox crackled with a soft tune, and the clock over the coffee machine ticked just past 9. Emily was at the prep counter, chopping vegetables for the lunch rush. Her radio tuned low to a local station. It was nothing special, weather updates, traffic, the sheriff's morning briefing. But as she wiped her hands and reached for the salt, the radio cut out mid-sentence. Static filled the air. Then a voice. Male, clipped, deliberate. Captain Carter, respond. Captain Carter, defend your position. This is command. The knife slipped from her hand, clattering against the counter. Everyone turned. Old Frank, who'd been nursing his eggs and coffee at the bar for years, frowned. What kind of joke is that? He asked, glancing at the static-spewing radio. But Emily didn't answer. Her face had gone pale, eyes wide, not in confusion, but recognition. The sound of that voice hit her like shrapnel through memory. Her breath caught. Her body froze mid-motion. The diner fell silent except for the radio's hiss. The cook in the back peeked through the kitchen door. Emily? You okay? He asked. But she didn't move. Her hands trembled as the voice repeated. Captain Carter, respond. This is command. We need your position. Do you copy? Someone laughed nervously. Guess we got ourselves a prankster, another patron said. But then Emily did something no one expected. She walked to the counter, reached for the radio with both hands, and turned the dial slowly, searching for the frequency. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low, steady, and terrifyingly precise. Say again, she whispered. Identify yourself. Everyone just stared. For a moment, there was nothing. Then the static hissed louder, followed by faint, coded beeps, Morse. Her pupils dilated. It wasn't random. It was a distress code, one she hadn't heard since the night her team went dark overseas. Her mind flashed back, the smoke, the desert, the blood, and the call sign that had haunted her dreams for years. Captain Carter, hold your line. Her hand shook as she reached for the volume knob. No, she thought. It can't be. Emily, Frank said again, his voice uneasy now. You're scaring me, sweetheart. But she couldn't hear him. The room had already faded away, the clinking of plates, the murmurs, the smell of frying bacon, gone. All she could hear was that voice from the past echoing through time. The voice that belonged to someone she'd buried 3 years ago. Then, just as suddenly, the broadcast ended. The radio went dead, replaced by static and the faint hum of silence. Emily stared at it for several seconds before she turned it off completely. Her shoulders dropped slightly, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The diner erupted into whispers. Someone said, "Was that the army?" Another joked weakly, "Maybe we got a secret agent flipping omelets." But Emily didn't laugh. She took off her apron, folded it neatly on the counter, and walked toward the back room. Through the kitchen door, she reached the small office where the freezer stood. Behind it, a steel lockbox no one else had ever noticed. She stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, before kneeling down and pressing her thumb against the scanner. A soft beep. The lock clicked open. Inside lay a pistol wrapped in cloth, a single pair of dog tags, and a photograph of a team, 6 soldiers in dusty fatigues, all smiling. The 7th space in the picture, the one at the edge, had been torn away. Her reflection stared back from the steel surface. Not the diner cook, not the quiet woman from nowhere, but the soldier she thought she'd buried when she came home. Captain Emily Carter, Intelligence Division, United States Army. When she finally came back out to the diner, the chatter stopped. No one said a word. She looked around at the faces she'd known for 2 years, the people who'd become her silent family, and forced a thin smile. "Sorry," she said softly, "just some old noise." Then she picked up her knife again and began to chop onions as if nothing had happened. But the old radio on the counter still hissed faintly, as though something was waiting to be said. And behind her calm eyes, a storm was beginning to move, one that had been silent far too long. Some people leave the battlefield, others carry it with them. And for Emily Carter, the war had just found her again. The night after the broadcast, the diner was empty long before closing time. The sheriff had stopped by to check the lines and reassure everyone it was probably a glitch, but Emily knew better. She stayed after hours, sitting alone in the dark with the radio's dull glow flickering on her face. The town outside was silent, a thin fog crawling over the asphalt. Her reflection in the window looked like someone else, someone older, heavier with ghosts. When she finally exhaled, it wasn't the sigh of a cook, but the controlled breath of a soldier trying to slow her pulse before a mission. She reached into her bag and pulled out the old photograph she'd found earlier that day. 6 faces in tan fatigues, grinning through sandstorms and exhaustion. Her unit, Echo 7. They'd been called Special Intelligence, Extraction Ops, Data Recovery. Only 5 of those faces were still alive, or so she believed, until that voice called her name. Emily opened a secure file on her phone, an encrypted app she hadn't touched since the night she vanished from the system. A grid of old mission logs appeared, each stamped classified. She scrolled past them, her thumb hesitating when she reached one labeled Operation Silent River. That was the last one. The ambush. The one that had killed Miguel Reyes, her sergeant, her friend. She had seen his body, or at least she thought she had, buried beneath smoke and shrapnel. But that voice, those code beeps on the radio, it had been him. The cadence, the exact rhythm of his speech pattern during distress calls. No one else would know that code. Not unless it came from inside her old team. The memories came like bullets through fog. A midnight convoy. A classified shipment. A betrayal from within. The explosion that ended it all. And her final order, shouted over comms, hold the line. No matter what. She had obeyed, stayed behind to secure the data while her team fell one by one. When extraction came, the files were gone, and everyone thought she was too. She'd walked away from the wreckage with a shattered shoulder, a damaged mind, and a dishonorable discharge she never fought. Because the truth was too heavy to drag into daylight. But now, the past had reached out. Someone had reactivated her old call sign. And if Miguel was alive, it meant the people they once hunted were, too. She rose from her seat, heart pounding as she retrieved the steel lockbox again. The pistol still gleamed faintly under the flickering bulb, the grip worn smooth by her hand. She checked the chamber, empty. She hadn't fired a weapon since the war. Her dog tags clinked softly as she lifted them, the metal cold against her skin. Captain E. Carter. She whispered her name like a confession, a reminder, and a warning. She spent the next hour dismantling the radio, tracing the signal source. Whoever sent the transmission had used an old military relay channel, one buried deep in obsolete comms frequencies. Tracing it led to a nearby repeater tower just 8 miles out of town. Too close to be coincidence. She copied the coordinates into her notebook, the same way she used to mark targets during recon ops. Then she grabbed her coat, locked the diner, and stepped into the night. The air outside smelled like rain and diesel. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of street lights, the creak of the signs swaying in the wind, her boots crunching against gravel. Her breath clouded in the cold, and for a moment she wondered if she was walking back into a world that had already buried her. But when she reached her truck and started the engine, the decision was already made. The soldier she'd buried was awake again. By the time she reached the tower, dawn was breaking, a thin blue light over the hills. The place looked abandoned, but her instincts screamed otherwise. She parked half a mile away and went on foot, crouching low behind brush as the wind carried faint static. A generator was running somewhere inside. She could see the faint pulse of a beacon light and a set of fresh tire tracks in the dirt. Someone had been here recently, and whoever it was, they'd known exactly which frequency to use. She found the transmitter half buried beneath a tarp near the base of the tower. Not government issue. Homemade, patched together with salvaged military tech. And taped to the side, smeared with dirt, was a small piece of paper. See, if you hear this, they found me. Don't trust anyone in uniform. M. Emily's hands went cold. It was his handwriting. She scanned the area again, the wind howling through the metal braces above her. There was no sign of movement, no vehicles, no bodies. Just that note, and the faint hum of a signal still active, sending out low bursts every few seconds. She crouched and adjusted the dial. A hidden frequency opened, a whisper, weak but audible. Emily, they're coming. It's inside the files. I couldn't, then static. Then nothing. She froze, every muscle tensed. It was Miguel, no doubt now. But the line was cut abruptly, interference from another source. Someone else was listening. Her old instincts kicked in hard. She packed the device, shoved it into her duffel, and sprinted back to the truck. As she started the engine, headlights flared behind her. Two black SUVs at the end of the dirt road. She didn't wait to see who they were. She floored the gas, gravel spraying like shrapnel as the chase began. In the rearview mirror, figures leaned from the windows, radios pressed to their mouths. Military grade, by the look of the vehicles, but not local law enforcement. Their headlights were sharp, their movements too disciplined. Private contractors, maybe, or worse, rogue operatives. As the truck roared through the winding roads, Emily's mind raced faster. How had they found her? Was Miguel still alive, or had someone used his voice as bait? And if they were after her, what was buried in those lost files from Operation Silent River that someone wanted erased forever? By the time she lost them, the sun was high, painting the town in quiet innocence again. She pulled into an empty field and shut off the engine. Her pulse was still thundering, hands trembling as she stared down at the transmitter in the passenger seat. She was supposed to be done with this life, supposed to be just Emily Carter, the woman who made omelets and smiled politely. But now, the soldier was back, and someone out there had just declared war on her silence. She reached into her glove box, pulled out a faded patch that once belonged on her shoulder. Echo 7, Intelligence Recon. She pinned it beneath her jacket, just over her heart, and whispered, "All right, Sergeant, let's finish what we started." Then she drove back toward town, not as the woman who ran the diner, but as Captain Emily Carter, U.S. Army Intelligence, coming out of the shadows for the first time in 3 years. When Emily returned to town, the diner was already surrounded by silence that didn't feel like peace. It felt like someone holding their breath. She parked behind the building and moved quietly through the back door, every sense awake. The radio she'd left on the counter still glowed faintly, static whispering against the low hum of the refrigerator. For a brief second, she almost wished she could walk back to how things were. Eggs sizzling, coffee brewing, small talk about weather and harvests. But that world was gone now. The war she thought she'd buried had followed her home. She unpacked the transmitter and spread the components across the counter, tracing the signal's path through the codes Miguel had left behind. Each burst of static carried fragments of coordinates, data packets layered beneath false frequencies. When she decrypted them, her heart stopped. The files referenced a cache, classified intelligence from their last mission, stolen during the ambush, hidden in a safe house not far from town. It wasn't coincidence. The people chasing her weren't ghosts from the past. They were here to recover what her team had died protecting. Outside, a truck door slammed. Emily's instincts flared. She ducked low, peering through the blinds. 3 men in tactical gear moved toward the diner, weapons drawn, their movements clean and silent. Contractors, maybe ex-military, the kind of men who'd do anything for whoever paid more. She slid across the counter, grabbed the pistol from the lockbox, and chambered around. Her mind wasn't thinking like a cook anymore. It was thinking like a soldier in enemy territory. She shut off the lights, moved behind the freezer, and waited. The front door creaked open, hinges whining softly. The first man stepped in, scanning the dark with a flashlight beam that cut across the counter. Another followed, radio whispering. Target inside. Confirmed signal source. Emily inhaled slowly. One heartbeat, two. Then she moved. A sudden crash of metal trays drew their attention to the left while she circled from the kitchen side. Crouched low, stepping between the shadows she knew so well. When the nearest man turned, she swept his legs and disarmed him in one motion, her elbow driving into his jaw with mechanical precision. He went down hard. The second spun, firing blindly, bullets tearing through coffee pots and shattering glass. She ducked behind the counter, fired twice, one shot disabling his weapon, the other lodging into his shoulder. The last man rushed in through the back, heavy boots stomping through broken glass, but Emily was already moving again, slipping through the steam and smoke of a tipped-over fryer. She grabbed a cast-iron pan from the rack and hurled it. It connected with a sickening crack. Silence fell again, save for the slow drip of grease and the ringing echo of chaos. She stood there breathing hard, weapon still steady, her reflection staring back from a cracked mirror across the room. The captain was back, and the look in her eyes wasn't fear, it was resolve. She went through their gear quickly, finding encrypted drives and comm units marked with a private security insignia. But one of the men was still conscious, groaning against the wall. She crouched beside him. "Who sent you?" she asked. He spat blood, muttering, "You should have stayed dead." She pressed the pistol to his chest, not to threaten, but to steady her shaking hand. "Who's paying you?" she asked again. His silence was answer enough. She didn't need a name. She already knew. There was only one person who had access to those files after Silent River collapsed. The contractor who'd betrayed them for the data. Before she could question further, the faint wail of sirens pierced the air. The sheriff was on his way. Someone must have heard the gunfire. Emily holstered the weapon and dragged the men outside, cuffing them with their own restraints. When the sheriff's car pulled in, lights cutting through dawn fog, his face went pale. "Emily, what the hell happened here?" She looked at him steadily, voice calm and almost detached. "Call the feds. Tell them Captain Carter just stopped an extraction team working under a false flag." He hesitated, blinking. "Captain." She didn't explain. There was no point. Some truths were too heavy for people like him to carry. 2 days later, federal vehicles rolled into town. The agents were cautious, respectful. One of them, a colonel with gray hair and quiet eyes, shook her hand. "We've been trying to trace that signal for months," he said. "Whoever sent it saved lives. Sergeant Reyes, he's alive. We extracted him this morning. He said you'd come." For a moment, Emily just stood there, unable to breathe. The weight she'd carried since the desert finally cracked, just enough for her to whisper, "He's alive." The colonel nodded. "He said to tell you." The line held, "Captain." Later that evening, the diner reopened. The windows were repaired, the radio replaced, the smell of coffee returning like the scent of forgiveness. The regulars came back one by one, acting as if nothing had happened, though they noticed Emily's hands still moved with that strange, precise grace. She wore the same apron, smiled the same way, but her eyes carried something new. Peace, maybe, were the closest thing to it she'd ever have. When the rush died down, she sat alone at the counter, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The radio crackled softly beside her, tuned to a quiet frequency. For a moment, it was silent. Then, just once, a faint voice came through. "Captain, we're home." Emily smiled, not the polite one she gave to customers, but a real one, the kind that comes after surviving what should have broken you. She turned off the radio, wiped her hands on her apron, and picked up her knife. The blade caught the evening light as she began to chop vegetables again, the rhythm steady, peaceful, almost musical. Outside, the town went on, unaware that a war hero was quietly keeping watch from behind the counter of their favorite diner. Some heroes never want parades, never ask for thanks. They just want quiet mornings, a sharp knife, and a place to belong. And as the last rays of sunlight touched the window, Emily Carter whispered to herself, "Defend your position." Then she smiled again, because for the first time in years, she finally knew what home meant.